Hi, I'm Kevin Stone. I'd like to welcome you to the first in our series of YouTube videos for a new YouTube channel called Keystone Outreach. Um, the, we're producing a series of videos here to cover important biblical topics, to explore who we as Christians are, what our real identity is, to clear up a lot of the misconceptions about what the Bible actually says, what Christ actually said, who we are in relation to the first generations of Abraham and to the other people of the book. So, and we're styling this as an outreach because the word that Christ and the disciples used for church, ecclesia, actually doesn't mean anything remotely like remotely akin to what we consider a church to be today. We consider a church to be an organization, alternately a building that we go to on Sunday for whatever reason. In fact, ecclesia means a calling out to, again, an outreach. And if we remember Christ's actual charge to his disciples, it wasn't for them to bring people to them in arenas or in homes or whatever. It was actually for them to go out and reach out. Their first charge was actually to reach out to the other members of the tribes of Israel. So we're not doing that today. The churches aren't doing that today. They exist for their own sake more than for the sake of the message. And the fact that they package, each sect packages its own unique branding of the faith indicates that, if there's one truth, which there is, then by definition, a bunch of denominations, each having their own packaging of that truth, each is lacking. They can't all be right. By definition, at most, one of them could be right. What are the odds that one of them actually even is right? So what we're going to do is we're going to work directly from Scripture and from history to identify a lot of the falsehoods that you've been sold, clear up misconceptions, and also because we've got this channel and we'll have an email address that you guys can submit questions, and we'll try to follow up and answer those questions as best we can. So, the idea here is to involve you in the process. Once I've provided a lesson in video form, you'll be able to follow up. And we're going to cover a broad range of issues, a very broad range of issues, including the origins of the what I'm just going to call it, the false church. The apostolic churches are a falsehood. They're predicated on multiple falsehoods and began diverging immediately. The disciples and their followers who were following the charge of Christ, they called their outreach the way. And it was absolutely distinct from the early apostolic church. And there was tension and indeed hostility, primarily directed at the way and their followers, who were called the Ebionites, by these growing apostolic groups, which arose from the ministry of Paul. We'll address Paul. Those of you who've heard me discuss Paul in the past know where I'm going with that, but we'll cover it in a video and try to cover all the bases. And by all means, as I'm providing this information, I strongly recommend that anyone following along don't take anything that I say at face value. I certainly am going to give it to you straight up and honestly, but verify what I'm telling you. You can and you should. So, but we're going to cover topics again. What the origins of the church are, who Christians are relative to the continuum from Abraham forward, the misconception that the Jews are the chosen people. The Jews are two tribes actually. Now, it's Judah was one tribe, but they also included the remnant of Benjamin, which was almost wiped out, and so actually it's two of the 12 tribes. But that's all that Judah ever was, to the extent that Judah even is still Judah. And we know what Christ had to say about those who call themselves Jews but are of the synagogue of Satan. So actual members of the tribe of Judah, they're brothers. They're part of Israel. But Israel is the chosen people. And who is Israel? Well, we'll cover that. And again, some of you who've heard me cover these topics know where we're going with it, but I think some of you may be shocked at the identity of who and what Israel really is. And it's not a place, it's not a geographic location, it's not a political nation. It's a people. And God's promise to that people was absolutely clear, and he promised to bring them all together in a place prepared, and he did, because God does what he says he'll do. So we'll cover who Israel is with extreme specificity, including how they got where they are. We'll also cover the relationship of Christianity to the other so-called religions or faiths of the book, to Islam and to modern Judaism, which again is not a monolithic entity, because there's all sorts of mystical offshoots, and but even if we're talking about Orthodox Judaism, contrary to popular belief, it's not. I have often here said that it's it's the older faith, and that somehow Christianity diverged. Absolutely not. The faith of Abraham and David and all the patriarchs and the prophets, all the way up to Christ. That's the faith of Israel, of the people of Israel. It's the faith of the book, and I think we will absolutely demonstrate that there's one faith that has propagated that and fulfilled the promises of the Old Testament of that faith. Judaism, as it exists, is the younger religion by a few hundred years, because it was really 3rd century writings of the rabbinical scholars that constituted the Talmud that was the basis of the religion we call Judaism, which did not exist prior to that. So we'll cover that and other far-reaching topics, but some somewhat esoteric, like the relationship of the zodiac, which was not created for. There's a reason that the Chaldean astrologers were decried in the Old Testament for abusing the zodiac to tell fortunes. That's not what it was there for, and there's a purpose. God wrote his gospel in the stars, and we'll address that as well. So we'll cover a lot of topics, But for this introductory video, the two topics I want to cover are again the church, the outreach, and then also the relationship of tithing to the church. And again, won't be what you expect or what you've been told, but we'll cover that right now. As previously stated, the church is not an organization. The church is the outreach. It's the spreading of the gospel. That's the church. It gets ecclesia gets defined in the modern sense as a congregation, but that's not actually. If you put the roots that form the Greek roots that form the word together, again, it means a calling out. It's an outreach. So to that end, that's what we are looking to be, is the real church, and hopefully some of you out there will join in that endeavor and become part of the outreach, part of the actual church. Absolutely, we know that what calls itself the church is anything but. It doesn't sit on 7 hills in Rome, and we know through John what Christ says does sit on the 7 hills in Rome, and it is not his church. That's for sure. So we're not an organization. We're led by the Spirit of, and with the guidance of Christ to give you the straight up message. That's what we endeavor to do. Also, in each of these videos, we want to take the opportunity to recall that Christ told us that when 2 or more are gathered in His name, He's with us also, and to invoke His name. And even though the connection is by video, to the extent that you're listening to me, and if you're listening with somebody else, there are 2 or more of us gathered in His name. So we absolutely invoke that presence. The other thing to cover is, one of the things that marks the false churches is their claim to be owed a tithe. But if we examine what the tithe was about, the tithe, the original tithe that's specified in the Old Testament, served a very specific purpose that no longer exists, which was to take care of the needs of the one tribe that was set aside as the priests to take care of the tabernacle, maintain it, and to minister as the priestly tribe to the other 12 tribes. So, of course, then God never intended that there be a fixed building, a fixed location, a temple, as Solomon built. God's desire was to have a movable edifice, the tabernacle, which went with Israel wherever they went. And I think the idea was to keep separate the notion of the religion being somehow tied to a place, or being a place, of Israel being a place. His people were wherever they are. That's their nation is wherever they are. So what happened after the Babylonian exile? There was no more temple. Of course, the tabernacle went away as soon as Solomon built the temple, and then ultimately the Babylonians, or Chaldean Babylonians, they destroyed the false edifice, and that was that. Now it was rebuilt where it existed all the way up to the Second Judean Revolt, and then the Romans destroyed it again. Clearly, it was not meant to be. The tabernacle was done away with by the Israel for the biggest mistake they made, I guess, but by the Israelites themselves, not by any foreign enemy. But the temples fell to foreign enemies because they weren't supposed to be there to begin with. So the reason for the tithe no longer exists. Not only does the edifice not exist to be maintained, but the Levitical priesthood has been obviated because Christ replaced the priesthood. He's, after the order of Melchizedek, he's priest and king. So there is no need to maintain a temple. His body was the temple, as we're told. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll rebuild it. And he doesn't need our money. But what he did do is, when he gave the disciples their commission, he also commanded to those who would receive them and hear the gospel that if it had meaning to them and they were willing to hear it, that they should take care of his messengers. And take care of meant if their coat needed repair or replacement, they do that. If they needed food to take with them or beverage or whatever, they would take care of that. Whatever their needs were to get from place to place, and that's legitimate. And so, to the extent we would like to be able to have a better background and some nicer graphics for some of these videos moving forward, and we want to also put together a website so that rather than having to go to YouTube, I won't say anything bad about YouTube since they're hosting us, but rather than have to go to YouTube, we would like to be able to link our videos to our own site and to be able to transact other things, and again, for you to send questions. We do have an email address, which is simply keystoneoutreach@gmail.com. For you to send questions, get in touch with us for anything else. But anyway, keeping that stuff, maintaining it, it's not going to be a major cost or anything. But to the extent that people want to contribute, well, there's a biblical basis for that. But don't think you have to tithe. The idea of the fixed tithe from the Old Testament to maintain the tabernacle, we don't have anything like that. But we will give you a link where if you want to contribute to help keep these things going and help defray some of the time burden of putting together the material in the videos, you're certainly welcome to do that. But anyway, that's the introductory video. We'll start covering additional topics moving forward. Again, the YouTube channel, which you'll already know where it is if you're seeing this, but it's Keystone Outreach, and that's us. So look forward to seeing you in the next topic, and hope you'll stay with us. And absolutely, if you have questions, concerns, comments, keystoneoutreach@gmail.com. We'll see you next time.